Let's have a round of applause for all of the work that that represents. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to everyone from beautiful Porvoo. Huomenta kaikki, I think is how we say it in Finnish. And my name is Karin Helmstaedt, for those of you who didn't meet me yesterday. And it is a huge pleasure for me to welcome you on behalf of the European Commission and EU MODEX to this DBX EU MODEX devoted to marine pollution. Now this, of course, is the final conference day of an entire week of exercises, so devoted to marine pollution scenarios, which we just saw there, and it is absolutely great to have everyone here in this room, but a warm welcome also to our virtual audience that's tuning in from afar. Let's make some noise here to give them a bit of a welcome. We are very much looking forward to having our virtual audience participate in questions and to have your devoted interaction here. But the people here in this room have done a lot of work this week, and I hope everyone's awake. This is definitely where we devote the day to conclusions and outcomes after 3 grueling days of exercise rehearsals. Now, what we just saw there in the opening video, as those of you here in the room know, was a mashup of the virtual reality disaster scenarios that were used in these exercises over the last 3 days. So simulations of marine accidents that have had a severe impact on both land and sea, causing injuries, possibly also casualties and environmental damage. And of course, scenarios that require a joint coordinated response from member states, participating member states, and the various authorities. And when we're talking about marine pollution, of course, you here in this room know that we're not just talking about plastic waste or debris, but also the many hazardous substances, oil, HNS, that can spill or be leaked during shipping and possibly in the event of a maritime accident. And as you all know, there are far too many examples of just how that can look like. And I'm going to name just a couple of examples that Harm wanted me to bring into the room here today because they're good for sort of reflection and discussion. Many of you will recall the Exxon Valdez back in 1989. That was when an oil tanker struck a reef in Prince William Sound in Alaska. And that released some 37,000 tons of crude oil into the environment and was the second largest spill in US history. Just over 20 years ago, in 2002, there was the oil tanker Prestige that sank off the coast of Galicia, that's northwestern Spain, with 77,000 tons of fuel oil on board. And that was one of the worst oil spills in European history, caused damage all the way up the coast to Brittany in France. And another example is from much more recently, back in 2012, and it's one that we'll hear quite a lot more about today. That was the cruise ship Costa Concordia that capsized, that hit a shoal and capsized off the Italian coast, and that was a disaster that left 33 people dead and took years to clean up. Well, as you all know, for the towns and the villages that are on the front lines of these kinds of disasters, the memories of beaches that are black with oil, of the toll that this takes on fishing, on tourism, livelihoods, wildlife, and of course the environment, are deeply, deeply ingrained. So the impact of these kinds of maritime accidents and incidents is incredibly long-term. Thankfully, they don't happen very often, but when they do, the response of the relevant authorities has to be swift and well coordinated, and that's why you've been here this week. So the operative letters here today are DBX, because this has been a discussion-based exercise, and that's a format that I know has been new to many of you. And it was designed really to bring together these different authorities, the marine responder communities, the civil protection communities on land, and of course the environmental agencies, with the idea of bringing together 4 different regions: Baltic, North Sea Atlantic, Mediterranean, and Black Sea, and running you through an exercise in 4 phases. So those 4 phases being alert, response, environmental response, and then of course the long-term impacts that I indicated earlier. So we're absolutely delighted because we have partners here from all over Europe, and at my last count it was 14 countries, so terrific that you could all be here. And it's very interesting to note that all of you can bring your unique experience and perspective to discussions of this common scenario, which is why this discussion-based exercise is so particularly, let's say, interesting in terms of the outcomes and hopefully fruitful. Because, of course, all the actions of the one authority affect the actions of whoever else is involved. So the idea is to strengthen collaboration and coordination between all of you to take an opportunity to build key stakeholder relationships. And that's why we're here in this context here today and over this week, because, of course, the coordination between the UCPM and EMSA also has to be the best possible coordination possible. So it's absolutely important, and that's why we've been here all together this week, you different groups, to understand each other really, and to understand each other's capacities, to know who is out there, how to actually map the different stakeholder scenarios, and to establish those networks and closer communication between, so offshore, onshore, at sea, and civil protection. Yesterday I got to sit in on a little bit of the discussion of the results, and so today is going to be about presenting those results. We'll also have some case studies for points of comparison, and basically create for you a basis for exchange on a tactical and a strategic level. That's really the difference here to a tabletop exercise, as many of you know. So we will be looking forward to taking your questions, and we'll be sure to make lots of time for those at the end of all of the presentation sessions. And for those of you joining us from in the virtual cyberspace, please do get your questions in during the proceedings, because they will be collated as we speak. Our agenda is pretty straightforward, but I'll give you a quick run through, because we'll have 2 morning sessions which will allow our DBX participants to present the results of the exercises. Groups of you worked very, very hard yesterday to create those presentations. And then we'll have some presentations from experts from the field of some real life scenarios for comparison. We'll break for coffee at 10:45, and then we'll also have a lunch break at 12:45. And in our afternoon sessions, what we're going to do, after having looked at the exercise in the morning, we'll focus on new developments in the field and see what kinds of techniques are out there for new types of cleanup, for instance. And we'll follow that with a panel session to wrap up. And I've got a number of victims in the crowd here today who are going to join me on the stage. A couple of the presentations of the participants, and then a couple of experts who were involved in the design of this exercise. A note to the audience, of course, once again, that your participation is welcome and encouraged. And so I'm just going to give you a few instructions on how we're going to do that, because we'll be using Mentimeter as our conference tool. So if you look at the chairs in front of you, you will see a QR code on the chairs. Those of you in the front row obviously don't have a chair in front of you. Hopefully there's a sticker, or you can, exactly right there. So just scan that, or you can also go to menti.com and use the 8-digit code that is also on the seat in front of you. So please remember, as I said, to enter your questions during the panel sessions. That really helps my team of curators in the background to have the time to collate them and to push them forward to me here on the panel, because we'll be doing that from the iPad. We're not going to have an open mic in the room, just so you know, so please try to keep your questions clear and concise. And for our virtual audience tuning in via YouTube, you can find the Mentimeter link in your browser. Just go to the browser. It should be in the chat. And the link is posted in the chat, and the 8-digit code is also in the chat if you wish to go to menti.com. So updates will be pushed by my moderators in the background into the chat for you there as well as quick surveys and the survey link. We do encourage you all to take the survey because, of course, feedback is very important. And just a quick note also for all of you that for everyone participating, the presentations will be made available afterwards, I believe, with a link sent to you possibly a week or so afterwards. So we do have a very busy day ahead, everyone, and before we get started, this, of course, an EU MODEX is always a huge feat of organization, so I think it's only fitting for us to have a few words from our host. And here to do the honors is Max Lönnqvist, who is director of the Itä-Uusimaa Welfare Area in which we find ourselves. So I would ask you to put your hands together and give him a warm welcome for a first address on this morning of the conference. Welcome, Max. Please take the stage.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Max Lönnqvist, and I'm actually the first director of Itä-Uusimaa Wellbeing County. This is the day number 61 since we started. Since the beginning of this year, we have 22 organizations in Finland which are responsible for producing services for healthcare, social services, and rescue services. Until now, there were about 300 municipalities working with the same questions, but during the COVID pandemic, the state decided that they have to do something. We have a bad history of reforms that didn't go through. During the last 15 years, there were at least 5 or 6 different attempts to create change and create bigger organizations for social services, healthcare, and rescue services, but now we managed to do something. Here in Itä-Uusimaa, we have about 2,500 employees. Our annual budget is about 400 million, and this is the third smallest, actually. But we have some special features. Some 30% of the inhabitants in Itä-Uusimaa have their language Swedish as their home language, and about 70% Finnish, and that's a difference from other areas. The government, of course, wants us to try to cut public spending. All the well-being counties in Finland spend on average 23 billion euros annually. And the growth rate the last years has been between 4% and 6%, and now they try to reduce it to some 3.5% annually. But that's not going to be an easy case. This is historical in many ways, since we are actually a new level of government, or public service in the area. The municipalities are still responsible for schools and planning of the environment and so on, but most of the public spending, more than 50%, is now on our responsibility. We, of course, try to create better integration between social services and healthcare and rescue services. Rescue services have been regional in many parts of Finland before, but now it's a part of the same organization as social services and healthcare. In this Uusimaa region, there are 5 different well-being counties, and our speciality is actually that we have a separate organization for specialized healthcare. In all other regions, the specialized healthcare is a part of the well-being county, but not here in the southern part of Finland. That is partly due to the fact that this is the most densely populated area. So we have an organization here which has about 39,000 employees, which produces the specialized healthcare and hospital services in Helsinki, Espoo, Vantaa, and also in this part. So we have a specialized healthcare unit here in Porvoo too. But I think that we have quite a good situation in Finland. All governments want to keep up the welfare state, and we want to develop this even further in the future. And of course, the public spending is a problem for us because the demographics in Finland are not favorable. People are getting older. There is not as much workforce anymore, so we have to come up with new inventions and new ways of working when we produce these services. But I hope that you will enjoy your stay in Porvoo and in Finland, and please come back in the summer. It's even better. These winters are quite terrible. I don't like them. I prefer the Mediterranean temperature and weather myself. Have a very nice day, and I'll sit here for a while and listen to your interesting presentations, and you can start the program now, please. Thank you.
Thanks very much to Max Lönnqvist for mentioning the challenges there that I think not only your country but so many countries across Europe are facing, and of course the past weeks and months, just to take a glance across just our continent alone, make it clear how absolutely crucial our civil protection teams are. So thank you very much for making these valuable exercises possible. Also here to speak from the Ministry of the Interior, the Rescue Department here in Finland, is Pekka Tiainen, and he's a senior advisor there at the Ministry of the Interior. Put your hands together for him for a short welcome as well.
My name is Pekka Tiainen, and I'm coming from the Ministry of Interior, Department for Rescue Services, and in the unit called EU and International Affairs. So my unit is looking after the civil protection, international assistance, among other things regarding the international activities like assistance to the foreign disasters. Also the Commission UCAPM, Union Civil Protection Mechanism related issues are in our unit. I'm very happy to see lots of familiar faces, colleagues, old friends here in Finland, and also thanks very much for the Hampastian, first of all inviting Finland to join to the consortium. I think it's almost 2 years ago when we have a phone discussion, and then I said to Hampastian that I might know one region who could be interesting of hosting the exercise. And the second call was, of course, to Peter Johansson, and Peter said that maybe this sounds interesting and maybe. So my first thanks goes to, of course, to the Itä-Uusimaa Wellbeing Area. It's It's been fantastic that you volunteered to host the exercise, and it was a bit more than we thought at the beginning, but I can see that it's been very, very successful. Discussion-based models exercise. If I look years back, down to 2010, 2011, when the first models exercise cycle was, 6 exercises altogether. I think we have gone a long path. The baby is not only walking anymore, it's running in a full speed. And the new concept, discussion-based exercise, is something what we should further develop, especially in exercises which are very costly, like marine pollution exercises. I mean, you need to have vessels, etc., to explore different type of ways to exercise. I think it's very, very good concept, and we should keep on doing that also in the future. So I wish you good luck for the rest of the course. I heard yesterday that it's been very intensive, and 14 countries. I heard it's a lot. I've been quite a long around in many exercises, and one of the best parts of the exercises are always of course, there's a content and agenda, etc., but it's about the networking. It's all about the network. When you go one day to the field, you know people, you have meet people. You meet people in Turkey, like we met in Turkey, etc. So it's so easy to work when you know people beforehand. You have a same type of training, etc. So that's one of the best things. And what I saw yesterday also, not only networking during the dinner here, but also later in the evening in a local bar. That's one of the most important things in all type of, let's say, trainings and exercises. Socializing, getting to know the people, and once you met them in the field, you know them beforehand, and it makes work much more easier. So with these words, I wish you a very, very good seminar day and rest of the exercise. And thanks very much for coming to Finland. Thank you.
Thanks very much to Pekka for hitting the nail on the head and indicating obviously that the networking and the communication and the exchange are the most important parts of these exercises. And aren't we glad that we can do this now after COVID, because for the past few years everything has been online. This is where things get really exciting, because now we're going to start looking at the results. We'll have presentations of the results of the DBX, and we'll start with the first 2 phases, so alert and rescue. And a lot of work went into these presentations, as I mentioned earlier, and I certainly managed to glean a lot of insights from what has been going on, and a lot of positive feedback already from these exercises. So here to do the honors are the participants who volunteered to present for alert and rescue. So George Catalin Dumitru, who's doing alert, he's from Romania, if you can come on up on the stage, and Tommaso Psino is doing rescue, he's from Italy. The floor is yours to present your findings for the group. Come on up. Give them a hand, people. Let's have a seat here and then you can do.
Good morning. I am George. I am the representative of the Romanian Naval Authority. I am the MRCC SAR mission coordinator. And I'm going to be the first to speak about this exercise. This phase, the alert phase, is not glamorous. You will not hear me talking about rescuing people, about pollution cleaning, or about things like mitigating long-term repercussions of an accident. But this is an important phase all the same, because if things are not managed well from this stage, everything can be much harder later on. Well, in order not to bore you too much, I will be brief. On the screen, just a sec. Yeah. On the screen are the main points we identified for this phase. So, the alert phase is where it all begins, by alerting the local authorities or ministries potentially involved that there is a possible situation developing, and we are going to try to involve as many possible as it will be required for the situation. The competent authority, which is the MRCC in most of the European countries, will take the lead and communicate with any vessels or any other relevant authorities to the developing situation to get as much information as possible. Crucial instructions should be available at any time as a checklist on the desk of the SAR mission coordinator, as it is very important we don't miss any critical information. Equipment is available to cross-check information received from the vessel. Assessing continuously the evolution of the situation and anticipating what assets will be needed to be deployed is the duty of the SAR mission coordinator at this stage. SAR units, equipment, personnel on standby, and cross-checking of any additional information, etc. When the situation is escalated to another phase, it's also very important. The regional agreements are developed differently and on different levels in Europe, depending on the actors involved, and the European mechanism has proven to withstand any adverse situations. There are plans at national level, but unfortunately there seems to be a lack of plans at the local level. And yeah, this is a cause for concern and needs to be addressed. Regular communication with the vessels involved has to be maintained so updates can be received timely. Vessels in the area can be requested to cooperate about assessing the situation and, if needed, help with the communication, confirming weather conditions and meteorological factors for the area. Many thanks for giving me your attention during this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your phase is very important to collect information because if the first phase it wasn't well, the next stage and the next phase is not be possible to manage this, the next stage in the better way. So we are starting with the rescue phase and starting from the situation assessment and prioritize, just to prioritize the event and the action that MRCC have to put in place. For sure, our first task is life saving. So is normal, but in the same time we have just to thank what need the people when they will arrive, they will disembark at land. So given the large number of people involved in this accident, we are talking about more than 700 people in. It is believed that the plan for the mass rescue operation should be activated with the immediate involvement of the authorities who will have managed the people rescued at land once they will arrive on land after rescue operation at sea. The second bullet, the use of the assets, military and civilian, in rescue operation. In that field, we have several international conventions that help us, help the Maritime Rescue Coordination Center to better manage this case. I'm talking about the UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on Law at Sea, the Hamburg Convention, you know, the SAR Convention, the SOLAS Convention, the International Convention on the Safety of Life at Sea, the YAMSAR, the International Aeronautical and Maritime Search and Rescue Manual, and the Domestic Contingency Plan. In that phase, we divert, so Maritime Rescue Coordination Center orders to the closest measure vessel to divert their course and proceed to maximum speed towards the two vessels that need assistance, because we know that some people are at sea. So they can provide shelter, they can provide situation report, they can provide life and help the people at sea. We request also the asset to domestic and military civil organization. We request also assets to the neighboring countries, neighboring MRCC. We nominate an OSIN coordinator and aircraft coordinator because in situ, on scene, it is important the coordination of the activities. We broadcasted the notice to Marine and to Marines and the aeronautical people and during the first phase, the alerting phase, we received the crew list and the passenger list to check the people rescued, the people that must be rescued. Civil protection assistance and the rescue organization shore and coordinate this activity is paramount for the operation, because sometimes land authorities and sea authorities speaks different languages, use different procedures. So that phase is very important to manage the situation at sea and situation when the people will arrive at land. So medical and consular assistance, we need to provide and be ready immediately to provide medical assistance when the people will arrive at land, but also we have to follow up these activities and not forget the consular assistance, because passenger and crew coming from several nations, especially if the ferry is involved in the accident, such as tourists. And in accordance with our experience, the contribution of the embassies is paramount to manage the permanence of the foreign people in our territory and their repatriation or homecoming. Assess the state of the vessel early on, safety and security assessment, stability of the assessment, because we know that the situation can change very fast during an emergencies. So we have ready to assess, to considering the current situation, the possible future scenarios, and a team of experts is activated to assess the situation of both ships in order to evaluate the appropriate action in the future situation. The relationship with the owner is a very important figure during the management of the emergencies. They provide information in the first steps. They provide crew list, passenger list, cargo manifest, all the information needed to manage in the first phase the emergency, but also in the next stage for the refund, for example, and to all the situation that we'll have in the next stage. Assessment a place of refuge, considering the current situation and the possible worst scenario, because we put in the worst scenario. At the moment, there is no need, but an early warning of activation of the place of refuge contingency plan is issued into the competent authority. Communication. Communication during an emergency, especially in the early stage, managing communication is more difficult than the emergencies itself. For this reason, the communication must be a plan of communication must be established in advance, tested during the exercise, and respected by all the the operators involved. Include a technical subject matter expert from early stage on. I said because during this kind of the emergency, we have several type of emergency in one scenario. Dangerous good at sea, pollution, stability of the ship, insurance, and so on. So in that phase, it is important to put in the same building, in the same crisis unit, all the matter experts that we have able to involve. Activate collaboration platform for the country, for the organization, but also for the matter expert, because maybe they are not in the same place of the mission coordinator. So to activate this platform, to share information, to receive documents, to share documents, it is paramount. Take legal and insurance aspect into consideration early on, because in the future state, this information will be used for sure, and it is important to provide this this assessment in the first step. Need of joining training exercise at national level and European level or regional or international level, and stimulate agreement platform between and plans between neighboring countries. These two last bullet are not the action that can be implemented during the phase of the emergency, but it is important to include them because they are essential for the success of an emergency. Personnel called to deal with an emergency must be perfectly trained for this purpose, but organizations also need to be tested that purpose. But it is not enough, because without the synergy of the action between the different authorities who have to manage different aspects of the same emergency, the best objective will never achieved. And again, the cooperation and solidarity with the member states or the neighboring states during the emergency must never be lacking, but must be trained at agreements and exercise. Thank you.
Thanks very much to George and to Tommaso for the first presentations based on all of the work that you've done, and a lot of us were able to actually see those priorities as they were lined up yesterday and discussed. And obviously these are two crucial phases during which these windows of opportunity are either there, and some of them are going to close very quickly. So thank you for sharing those results. And now what we're going to do is take some time to make a comparison with these results between some real life case studies. And I mentioned earlier the Costa Concordia, which of course was a situation, a marine emergency that did not involve a spill, a chemical spill, but had enormous implications in terms of the rescue efforts necessary. And here to present about the Costa Concordia is David Fabi, and later on Rodolfo Giovannini is going to join us on stage actually also to talk about this particular scenario, because David is here to cover the civil protection perspective, but Rodolfo Giovannini Romania is also going to talk a little bit about the environmental protection perspectives later when we're seated on stage. So David works at the Italian Civil Protection Department. He's been there since 1999, and over the past 15 years he's gained both national and international operational experience at major events. He's fully trained in the UCPM and involved in the mechanism training program as a course director, as a main facilitator, and as an exercise director and designer. So very crucially for this case that he's going to present as the deputy head of the National Coordination Center. He was part of the Costa Concordia emergency operations from 2012 when it happened all the way up to 2014. So let's give him the floor for some learnings from the field. Welcome, David. Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. Thanks for having. Really appreciate that you invited the Italian Civil Protection as a representative of an entire community to share with you this unbelievable experience. And thanks for having organized these days, absolutely necessary and useful. And I hope that this further conversation we may add some other input to the discussion that we had. Yes, we will try to make some comparison. And yes, during Costa Concordia, I was the deputy head of the coordination structure. And I had to say that for me, it was an unbelievable experience. You will see during the story I'm going to tell the different aspects that we have been touching. This is one of the events that you remember exactly where you were when you received that call. You remember who you were with, the people that were with you. You will remember the discussion you had at that very specific moment. And then after that, it becomes to be a gray area. My involvement lasted 2.5 years, since the very beginning until the Costa Concordia was towed to Genova for the dismantling. That's when my activities ended. So we know all the story. The Costa Concordia diverted from the expected course, and with a lack of communication between inside the ship. The ship was too fast, too close to the island, hit the reef, and you see a 70-meter long gash was made in the hull below the waterline. The ship was carrying more than 4,000 people, all rescued, but 32. We say 33 because a diver during the salvage operation died during the work. So 33 at the end will be the people who lost their life because of this tragedy. This some timing, and as you can see, the ship was going from Civitavecchia, that is Central Italy, to Savona, this in Liguria. And then for this absurd maneuver, again, it went too fast, too close to the island of Giglio, and at 21:45 there was a collision on the port side and on the hull, and the eastern rock, this is the seaward rock of Isola del Giglio. And immediately a blackout, loss of propulsion, and so the last order was hard to starboard. So that's the last order that was recorded. And immediately compartment flooded, engine not working anymore. And so because of the prevailing wind and abbrivio that the ship had, it reached that position in front of Isola del Giglio in the only possible place. Otherwise, we would have been talking of something totally different about that. So she reached that final position approximately around 11 when the ship grounded, and it could have been very different. And then evacuation was ordered. So you can see by the time the trial has been, and so many things has been said about that, but definitely this is a very short story of those terrible moments. I will come back to this first moment when I will address the salvage at sea phase. Now I just would like to give you the overview, the scenario and the situation where Costa Concordia was resting. So this is the gash, okay, beyond the water line, so 17 meters. There was a rock, so there was a rock from the seaward rock. It was then in the middle of a square in Giglio, in memory of the people who lost their lives. A picture just to appreciate the damage caused by this maneuver. As you see, it's on the port side, and the ship was resting on the starboard side, resting on two rocks. So this is the scenario, the final scenario in front of the port. Okay, so the sailing was permitted because there was enough space, but of course the Coast Guard has to put in place all the safety measures. And in an environmental protected area, and people on board, I have other elements. So the ship was resting on a 35 maximum depth seabed, resting on two rocks. And one of the biggest problem for the security operator, or the safety of the operator, was is this ship stable or not? I will come later to this point. So these are some details of the ship, okay, other dimension on board, so you can see what kind of threat. More than 4,000 people, a huge load of chemicals on board, and as Karin anticipated, then Rodolfo, that will come after me, will definitely will show you all the environmental action that have been undertaken on those days. And so this just to have an idea about the dimension of the scenario that we have been facing. And I think that we'll never forget the heavy weight of sorrow and grief that this tragedy brought us. So I asked the colleague if we can start the video.
Sono qua dietro, perché...
Era là dietro, sì.
È questa!
These are the communication between the Coast Guard. They are flying over the Costa Concordia with the helicopter. They are communication with the
Linea 02 dal Rescue Mike Delta. Già.
No, lo mettiamo 80 nodi, dico.
Sì, potete gentilmente confermare
you see it's salvage operation ongoing. These are people
India Charlie India 02, Rescue India Mike Bravo, comunica il suo on task.
And we could remind with Rodolfo how many vessels were present on those days. So private vessel, patrol boat, commercial vessel. And as you can imagine, this had a huge impact on media all over the world. In the island, there was half operator and half journalists, media, whatever, from all over the world. Because you can imagine around 50 different nationalities on board, okay? Apart the kind of event we are talking about. These are the mass rescue operations, so this is assistance on land, on the mainland, so people were brought from Giglio Island to the mainland. And these are not only salvage at sea, but there was a huge underwater operation to recover bodies. We will see then how important was communication during this crisis and the decision taken to manage the communication towards media and toward the population of the island. And huge scientific operation was put in place to analyze and monitor the ship. And then we immediately start to have in mind the wreck removal project, and of course that and all the environmental activity. These are only images. I will leave then to Rodolfo, where they will explain you the complexity of this operation. But the more than 2,000 tons of heavy fuel oil were really a threat. And so immediately after the emergency, the Costa appointed a salvage company. It was a consortium, Dutch and Italian consortium, Neil Smith. And so they will take care of these really important activities. Okay, there was an intense monitoring activity then under the environmental point of view. So, but again, the wreck removal project, you know, the idea was very simple. Also, to rotate the ship, provide floating capacity, and then tug to Genoa. It is the idea. The idea is it. And so this is important, and I will highlight the role of the public administration in all this process, okay, on being very close to the ship owner, the insurance companies, and all the different actors that were involved. So this is the power buckling when the ship was rotated. And then after several months, pontoons were melted in the port side and the starboard side, so to provide floating capacity, and then it was tugged into to Genoa for the final dismantling. And during the final dismantling, there were found the remains of the last victim, the Indian warman. So that's why I say, under the professional point of view, it was really incredible to work with such incredible guys. And also I have to say, in our public administration, we have incredible excellencies and competencies, and I was very lucky to have worked with them all. So this is the arrival in Genoa Voltri, the harbor that was selected for the final dismantling operation. And yes, these have nothing to do with the rescue response phase, but I think that is interesting to know how it ended up. Okay, and let's go back a little bit. So all available means, yes, you could see that was really an impressive salvage operation. And that was coordinated by the Coast Guard that are in charge. The communication that you heard were from the Sub-Maritime Rescue and Coordination Center, Rodolfo from Livorno. That was the competent center for this salvage operation. And of course, all available means, as you see, there were fishermen, there were private boat, a lot of patrol boats, 12 from the Coast Guard, then we have Guardia di Finanza. And this, as you see, no, you could not hear because it was in Italian, but the on-scene commander is flying, he said. So the on-scene commander was on the helicopter, and he was managing and coordinating all the relief effort. This was really impressive. And this salvage operation then led to the other part, so the rescue operation with the civil protection assistance. So this entire operation was led by the Grosseto, that is a city in Tuscany prefecture. So it is a state on site. So they have the power to move all state resources, and that's where the coordination for this phase can be identified. And after the salvage operation, there was still SR on board, and search and rescue on board. This was managed by the fire brigade. So the local fire commander was appointed as head of the operation for the searching on board. Searching on board means the searching on the upper floor, the upper bridges of the ship where they not underwater, but then an intense diving operation that was done underwater. And so these were some of the conditions that the people were working in. It is like, if you think, I will try to give you this hint, it's like a building. You can apply some user I would say, ideas about that, but it's something totally different. The corridor are pit, the ceiling are floor, and the conditions are incredibly harsh. So that was really complex, multidisciplinary, multi-agency. When we talk about the holistic approach and the coordinated approach, the only way to solve that problem was to work in a coordinated manner. So I listed here all the different considerations that then immediately cause an upscaling of the coordination. It had to be national because you need extraordinary resources, extraordinary means to solve that situation. So that's why, at the very end, considering this situation, the decision was the declaration of a national emergency. On those years, civil protection was having a time of recast, if I may say so. And this event really was giving the idea that something different had to be done. So this is not a civil protection event. In our legislation today, this is not considered, okay? But the only way to do that is to give the power to someone, and that was the deputy commissioner that was in charge for the overall operation, and he can use legal act to rule the overall emergency. So the head of civil protection department acting as a deputy commissioner appointed by the government. So these are the line of activities. The search for bodies was crucial and had to be concluded. These were the first words that he said on the first meeting in Giglio Island. Another worry was about the environmental operation. You have seen the load of chemicals that were on board, but those operations were still ongoing. The Coast Guard immediately activated the anti-pollution plan around the ship. Luckily, no pollution was recorded. Ship stability and displacement monitoring, fundamental, because there was an object that is not built to rest like that. So there need an intense study behind that. So we had to involve the expert, but we haven't the experts for that. So we have to turn geological experts that were able to describe how the earth, how land is moving in case of landslide, and to turn their instrument to monitor something like this. And then the choice of the removal project. So, sorry, I'm going beyond the rescue phase, but I think it's relevant. I will not touch any environmental issue, but I think it's interesting to see how this has been solved. So we had to readapt a response model just to have this coordinated, integrated, holistic approach, putting some pieces together. So that's why we have the technical and scientific committee where Rodolfo was part of. We need to have so advisor because we didn't have seen such a thing. So we need to have close to the commissioner somebody advising about all the technical issue. Another advisory committee was established. This was a sort of political committee. So you had all the relevant authority in charge for this kind of event and all the authority that needed for the managing of this kind of event. The deputy commissioner was, the crisis management unit was established. That's where we have been working. And then you see all the other partners, implementing partners. These are made by law. And so there are people that had to do those yellow boxes. Control surveillance and cleanup. So really specific activity. It's a complex system. In each box, you find all these different administration, a fundamental role with the private companies. Costa was deeply involved. In the very hour after the accident, it was very difficult to have somebody on the island. But then we managed to do that, and they have been always present, and they support us from the beginning until the end. And this is another aspect I will highlight later. When we come back to diving underwater on those conditions, those were the situation, okay? visibility from 80 to 10 centimeters. So the body were recovered by impact. So the divers that were moving in the corridor, in the pit, they found the body. They found the body because they had an intelligence that they had to be set up between fire brigade, navy, carabinieri, and all the different administrations that were involved in this situation. And they had to establish a new procedure. So those are all the administrations that were part of this underwater activity. There was need to establish a joint coordination diving center, totally new, something totally new in this situation. And so heavy operational condition, strict safety measure. So the time for diving was restricted. They are always working in pair, as a dive should always be done. And then poor visibility. Following and precise intelligence indication, that was fundamental. It's something that looks like what the users do when they work on an earthquake. But now this is a very strange object. These activities ended on the second half of March. Until 16th of February was led by the Fire Brigade. Then the Commission appointed the Coast Guard Admiral as responsible for that. This was ended at the 23rd of March. Last victim recovered during the dismantling of the ship. Again, another point, the monitoring system. We moved from a handcraft system, glasses, just to see that the ship is moving. The people that were going underwater need something to operate in total safety. They never operate in total safety. But at the very end, we quickly had to introduce this system. So you see, these are instruments used for earth moving, land observation, using landslides. And so the University of Florence, the Department of Science, that is one of the excellency university that work with the civil protection, they put in place this system. And at the end, the ship was twisting like that. And in month, it just moved 1 meter. It was a stable position. Immediately after the event, we asked to the Italian Naval Registry to study the stability of the ship. So the stability of the ship was ensured up to a 2.5 meter of wave. Weather conditions hampered sometimes the operation. Some day after the event, we had a storm in Giglio, not a heavy storm, but then the operation had to be stopped. And so the prediction of the time for everything has to be multiplied by 2 because you had the weather. So this is another factor. I said that was crucial. That made the difference between a bad emergency management and an emergency management the way it should be done. So with the regular meeting with the people, with the local population, adopting a transparent approach to all the action that have been undertaken. So this was done regularly by the head of my department. So the big boss was there every week. And so that definitely helped us a lot to work in the best manner. And with the media, again, the line was having only one voice that's talking. And that was, for the COVID, for example, we had several problems because we didn't manage to have one voice, but a lot of people was talking. That it is not that you cannot talk, but about that, the line, the strategic line has to be given by only one person only. So it worked. So I showed this picture just to emphasize the second point and the role of the private and the public. The public was present in the choice of the wreck removal. You know that it is This, of course, is absolutely usual to many countries. But you see the percentage of the criteria that has to follow the choice of the plan has been established together. So environmental impact, that's fundamental. That's why we decide not to cut the ships in pieces, but to have only one piece. And the timing, the cost is the less important for us. Again, avoid sectioning of the ship, a guarantee so that the people could keep a normal living condition that will not influence it too much their activity, their life. Again, after the wreck removal, that was really a huge salvage operation, and the part blacking happened in September 2013, refloating and towing July 2014. And then after that, the ships arrived in Genoa. So I had listed some of the points that, considering this as a general emergency that lasted 2.5 years, I would list as the most relevant, and I would list as a key element. The relation public-private was transparent. It was absolutely fundamental, because otherwise I make it very easy. That almost, I don't know if $1.5 or $2 billion that were used to remove Costa Concordia, only the private could afford, with insurances, of course. There was a moment in the very first day, that was not very clear. So there was some friction, but luckily they were well negotiated and sorted out. Collaborative approach. After Costa Concordia, there were many studies, articles that have been published, and so one of the things that have been recognized that worked very well was this collaborative approach that we can translate into a holistic and integrated approach. Strong leadership. We were lucky that we had very good people at a higher level, so that can support and lead the entire community on that. I think I am done. So thank you very much for your attention, and have a good continuation.
Thank you very much to David Fabi. I'll just ask you to take a seat here. And Rodolfo, are you going to come up and join this question period as well? That was the information I was given. I'd be very happy to have you join us, and just take a seat here next to David. And I can sit down. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for all of it. Oh, we're not doing very well on gender balance here, are we, ladies? Goodness gracious. It's going to get better as the day goes on, I promise. Thank you very much also to George and to Tommaso. And I guess one of the first questions, we'll stick with the Costa Concordia because it's the freshest in our minds. Thank you very much for giving us such incredible insight and detail into the complexity and the dimensions of this tragedy. A question that has come in already from our public is, did the Costa Concordia incident trigger major changes in your response plans? So perhaps I'll start with you, David, and then come over to Rodolfo. And let me just tell everybody a little bit about Rodolfo, because Rodolfo is going to present another case study later on, and he's a captain in the Italian Navy and currently employed at the Ministry of Environment and Energy Security in Italy, and he's got more than 30 years experience in Coast Guard functions with marine pollution, emergency management, and harbor management. And of course, during the Costa Concordia emergency, he was nominated as the representative for the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure in the Technical and Scientific Committee. So you're going to give us a bit more the environmental perspective on that. And I would ask that question to both of you, start with David, as to whether it triggered any major changes in your response plans. We have the, excuse me, I'm just noticing we don't have any microphones here. There we go. I'm going to pass that around. Thank you very much, Lisa.
So under the response point of view, I think it did not change a lot, in the meaning that the system that is in place in the country is such that working with different actors, working in difficult situations than we had the experience of COVID and the world. And so that definitely triggered different discussion about that. But I have to say that having such a system, it was the only way to convene all the different actors on the same place. So for me, that was the key element for the removal at the end, for having managed this situation. So I have to say that from the salvage at sea, they were normal, not normal in the terms of number of people, but those are the procedures that they have been to apply to salvage. The response was based upon a consolidated civil protection system. I have to say that probably some changes have been made at the legal level, at a procedural level. So, but probably Rodolfo, you can take this one. But under the civil protection point of view, that was another example of how people can be resilient and can come out after this terrible event. Again, then we had COVID, then we had response to the consequences of war for the Ukrainians. So I have to say that the system is quite resilient. Not so able to expect, to predict. That was really very difficult to predict that in the middle of the Mediterranean, so modern ship could fail like that. But again, we definitely learned a lot in some other aspects.
Learnings that you've been able to take on and apply in subsequent years.
Yeah.
That's the nature, of course, of these black swan events, is that it's impossible to predict. Rodolfo, perhaps you can just say a few words. You mentioned to me yesterday, talking about the Costa Concordia, that it was a town. So, I mean, obviously, we're not talking about a major spill here. It's not a pollution event in terms of the environment afterwards. But you were dealing with incredible amounts of waste, some of which was chemical, as David expressed. So, could you give us just a kind of an overview of the implications, the environmental implications of this emergency, and then perhaps come back to the question of whether there were major changes that were triggered in your response systems by this incident?
Yes. Before to answer to this, I want to say that I was also seconded at the National Civil Protection Department for years, and in that time we updated our contingency plan, national contingency plan on oil spill. That was made at the beginning of the 80s years, so we updated just before this tragedy, and it was very important. This is another thing that I want to stress, that it's very important to continuously update our contingency plan in order to be prepared and to insert the lesson learned that comes up years by years.
Okay.
About the environmental aspect that I will present later, yes, it was something really new, because in every disaster you have 15, 20 people on board. In this case, we have an entire town with 4,000 people living there. So you can imagine, have a theater, have a swimming pool, have accommodations, a very enormous engine, all the cleaning agents that you have in your home, all the stuff you have in a supermarket, everything was there underwater. Mm-hmm. And this was the first time that we had to face this kind of a situation. Mm-hmm. And we invented a method cooperating. I must say that it was a very good cooperation with the ship owner.
So what did you see, both of you, before we go over to our two participants, what did you see in their presentation that possibly didn't correspond or does correspond to how you would see the perfect coordination between all of these various different bodies, especially public and private, which you were stressing there, David?
Well, I have to say that we have been through many of the different aspects that you have highlighted, and something was not present, and I refer to the environmental, but environmental was a threat. So we did not respond, but we had an intense prevention activity. And so I think that we went through. And I have to say that one of the points that you mentioned about the exercises was, and I have to say that Costa Concordia triggered a lot of interest. I remember a workshop done at Giglio Island with the international expert. And there was the MIC those days. So one of the results was the MIG should implement underwater capacities, 2012. And then I remember we had an exercise, a full-scale exercise in Salerno when we used the lesson learned under the operational point of view because of some scenario where dealing with divers. So we had to go back to the memories of Costa Concordia. And during the Costa Concordia, we had a visit, United Nations European Commission visit. Paolo will remember that, just to view, appreciate what was going on there. And so it triggered a lot of interest. We had another project that was always funded by the European Commission with a very difficult pronunciation, JF WEDROP, Joint Force Water Environment Disaster Relief Operation Platform. That was a platform for divers to identify criteria for an asset, a module, possible module in this case of emergency. So we learned that we had to do something in terms of response. That's why we had to work on this European project, and a really good example of a lesson learned and follow up after this event.
Thanks very much, David. I'd like to, maybe we'll hand the microphone over to George and to Tommaso. And what have you taken from, first of all, the experience that you had here over the last 3 days, and what you've kind of crystallized out of it as the way forward for planning a strategy and a tactical strategy? And what have you seen in this presentation that perhaps applied or perhaps didn't apply, and where you realize that one needs to go a bit deeper?
Well, during this exercise, I saw more of what is going on during disaster. Mm-hmm. I know from my point of view what has to be done, but the other elements involved, I knew very little about this. So yeah, bringing all the experts together and seeing what everyone has to do, it put things in a new perspective. Yeah.
Tommaso.
Yeah, I'm Italian too. I'm a Coast Guard too. So actually, I'm working in Maritime Rescue Coordination Center. So I know very well I wasn't there, but I know very well the Costa Concordia, the rescue phase, and so on. So. I think that our presentation was made also for the remember of the event of Costa Concordia, and also the procedure in the Maritime Rescue Coordination Center in Rome was not changed but adapted after Costa Concordia, and because to manage more than 4,000 people in the same time during the night time in a very small island, it is very hard. It's very hard, and but during this exercise, I come back home maybe for sure with an important experience from my point of view, because I can share in that days the experience from the colleague that work in the Maritime Rescue Coordination Center, but also the colleague that work for civil protection, for wildlife experience. So it is important to share this kind of experience before the emergency and put in place during the emergency, the real emergency.
Thanks very much for that. Now, one of the questions that has come in, and maybe I'll start with you, Tommaso, and then we can move along the line if others have something to contribute, is would it be useful, and you, David mentioned, for instance, the creation of an entirely new diving platform that had to happen there relatively ad hoc. Would it be useful to establish a European subject matter expert task force, has been asked by our participants?
Yeah, as I presented during the presentation, the expert must be in the unit, the crisis unit, in the same building of the coordination of the coordinator of the activity. This is fundamental, and all kind of expert must be there, from the safety of the ship, the security or the rescue operation or the pollution operations on. Also for that kind of experience must be shared in the European member states and used during the real emergency.
George, do you have anything to add?
Well, I actually agree with what Tommaso said, but yeah, I think that creating a task force at the European level, it's a good idea for disasters that last a long time. But for immediate response, we should have a task force created on a local level.
Mm-hmm.
I would like just to emphasize one point about the subject matter expert. During these days, we had at our disposal people that we are not used to work with, but mainly the insurance companies, the P&I, ITOF. But my experience was different in a way that they had to be there. During the 2 years and a half, they were a really, really important part. I remember Carnival, I remember the London Shore Consultant, I remember the Lloyds. I remember all the people that we had to meet, because they're important partner. But again, this is not part of the rescue, possibly, but they were immediately active. So we know what's behind that. And definitely, it's for this kind of event, it's really a huge work that is moving together with you. We were used to, unfortunately, earthquake, unfortunately, flood, so we know who's moving around. But for me, that was really a discovery, total discovery, to understand how complex. So that's why I repeat again, the cooperation between public and private was fundamental under this aspect.
Yeah, so I would like to stress two things. One is the importance also to insert in our procedure the new technologies that are a very big opportunity. The technologies helps us in this case. For the first time, we are able to recover a vessel of such enormous dimension. It was the first time ever at the worldwide dimension. So we have now this possibility. We should insert the possibility to share information, to talk with another, watching in the eyes on the other side of the world, because he's the most expert in that matter. So,
which specific technologies are you referring to at this point? Are you talking about salvage equipment and
everything? Expertise, for instance.
Okay.
So in this moment, you have not an expertise in your building or in your vicinities. You can call some other using meat or some other new technologies, and should be also these one tools that we should update our contingency plans. So why not? And the second one is that we should capitalize our experience. Sometimes we are very happy to have done a very good job, but the capitalization we miss to insert in our future years because we just say, okay, it is archived, no? We put in somewhere all the experience, we not capitalize it. We don't train the people, we don't share the experience, we don't teach the younger generations, yes, and we don't capitalize our experience.
And what would be the biggest challenges with sort of cooperation between different nations in order to share those experiences and capitalize on that?
Yes, it is very important for this, because in that case, sometimes we cooperate with someone else, with someone that we never have cooperated before. And we understand the importance of share point of view, experience, concern, everything in order to reach the best way to solve the situation. And it's very important to continue in this way and say, guys, please understand that this is the best way to cooperate and face the emergencies.
Thanks very much, Rodolfo. Maybe if we could pass the microphone back over to our two participants, because there's a question here that I think is directed to you. What are the biggest challenges with the cooperation between different nations? Your exercise, of course, had dummy nations that were possibly to be able to, if you were considering an area like here where you're looking at Finland, Sweden, Norway, etc., Denmark. What were the most challenging aspects there you were in the rescue phase?
Yeah, as I said during the presentation, maybe the rescue phase is we have the best rules and the complete rules to manage an event. We said the international convention, the YAMSA manual, and so on. So
and there's a very clear prioritization in the rescue phase.
Yeah, the presentation and also the procedures and the action that must be taken place during an exercise. So the colleagues from other RCC will deploy the same action that we in Italy, in the Italian Coast Guard Coordination Center, we put in place. So for that point of view is quite similar. So maybe not big problem for this kind of point of view. Yeah.
George, do you have any observations there? I mean, between F-land, S-land, and D-land that you were using in the exercise. Obviously, you said the alert phase, obviously not the glamorous phase of the entire operation, but I can imagine that communication is perhaps one of the biggest challenges at that phase.
Yeah, communication brings a challenge, but yeah, as you can see here, we brought 14 countries together, and we managed to have a beautiful and fruitful cooperation, and yeah, conclude an exercise in a very good manner, and we learned a lot of things from it. But as Tommaso said, for rescuing, most of the plans, of the national plans, are based on SOLAS, on YAMSAR, so they are similar, very similar. So yeah, there was not much of friction, or yeah, everybody knew what had to do.
Everybody knew what they had to do. Well, that's certainly good news. I have a question. I want to go back to David, because we talked also yesterday about the fact that this DBX, this discussion-based exercise, has brought together a number of players who are possibly somewhat overlooked and maybe not always involved at the phase when they should be. Keyword insurance, and insurers were definitely involved in your discussions over the last 3 days. Marine insurance, and there was a comment from an insurance representative that I spoke to yesterday who said that actually it's crucial for them to be involved already from the alert phase. And David, we were talking about the fact that early involvement is often military, Coast Guard, etc., who are not really thinking about insurance because that's sort of not something that's on their radar at that point. How useful has that kind of an interaction been at this discussion-based exercise, and how can insurance be brought in at an earlier time?
No, that was the point I raised before, and for me that was relevant. I don't think that in immediate aftermath we may have a direct involvement, because of course there are other channels through which insurances can be involved. Again, that was mine was a privileged position in which I could see all the different mechanisms running around these emergencies. So I appreciate the role of the different partners. As I say, the insurance and P&I and the rest played a fundamental role for us. I didn't know. RINA for me was just a name. Then I discovered that the Italian Naval Registry P&I took me some time to understand the meaning for that, and the role of the London Shore consultant was lock. So then we discovered that again, that's the reason why I said that was really an incredible professional experience for me, because yes, they can be involved. We should find some mechanism for that. I don't see a clear light for that, I have to say, considering I have seen the operational, the strategic part. But definitely they must be somehow part of the game. And an incredible experience. Just, Karin, let me say that it was for me probably the toughest, considering apart COVID, in which we were operator, rescuers, and victim at the same time. But that was toughest for me because considering the relationship with the public, one of the main things, the first thing that my boss did was to talk to the families of the victims. We were still searching people. And every day at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we had this meeting in a small room in front of the harbor. And then he went there, he talked to the families. One day he has to go back and ask me to do that. So I have to say that was really the toughest thing I have did in my life, because it was a week, 8 days after. So we were searching for bodies, but still you see families hoping that you will you will bring back somebody alive. And so with me and the colleagues from the Fire Brigade, we were explaining what we were doing. And so again, under the personal point of view, we had discussed about procedures, about possible improvement, the main takeaway. Let's think us about our personal preparation when we face this kind of event.
Yes, thanks for the question, because it's very important to stress this point. And I came again to the point that I said before, to capitalize the experience. We had this strong experience with Costa Concordia. We involved since the first meeting of the scientific and technical committee, ITOPS, to brief us on the rules for the claim. So in which way we should write the plans, how to justify any decisions, how to archive all the considerations. And it was incredibly useful. And they were really nice. They give us all the more important information on this and advices. And today, after 10 years, I still watch that maybe many colleagues doesn't know that. So it means that maybe we did not capitalize correctly this experience. But it was on the basis. You can imagine that a bill of $1.5 billion arrived on your desk. You will go to read any pages and see if it is correct.
See if there's a protocol to follow.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely. So there's definitely a need for more amplification of the experience, and possibly even more opportunities like this DBX to be able to present these findings and compare these findings.
Yes. In updating the contingency plan, you should say, guys, at this point, call the insurance and be briefed by them on these cases.
A final question here from our audience has been put in with regard to the Costa Concordia. Is there anything that would have helped to improve the response further, to make it better or faster in retrospect?
Yes, but more or less in in actual procedure, we have done this already. What maybe could be is how many actors involved more respect than the past. We were more reflecting in our organization and less on the spreading of the information and the possibility to anticipate any escalation of the situation.
David, any thoughts on that?
No, about Costa Concordia, I think that the response system was the only possible. Of course, the communication on board, they should have been different, but just to anticipate the response, because we, Rodolfo, were discussing about the delay in some order given on board that definitely delayed the response phase. On the other hand, I want to stress that thanks to the prevailing wind that brought the ship where it rests for 2 years and a half. So this really was a lucky situation after all. But definitely having had an earlier order from the shipmaster, from the captain on board, probably could have saved more life.
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much for that. Well, I hear some mumblings in the room here, so I think we're going to wrap up and send everybody off for a coffee break. But it seems to me that a European subject matter expert task force is something to consider, and the point has been made and stressed a couple of times how important it is to be updating contingency plans and actually sharing all of the experiences and capitalizing on the learnings that have taken place during some of these extremely tragic experiences. Thanks very much for bringing all your wisdom in on the Costa Concordia, and thanks to our alert and rescue phase representatives. And we'll send you off to coffee break and see you back here at in 40 minutes, I guess you've got. So thanks very much for your participation so far. Thank you.